Hey everybody, how's it going? It is January 11th, 2023. We're still here in 2023. Who knew? Uh in the chat with us is Corbin,
Hello. It is me.
bringing all the energy.
Yes, I've got my comfy sweatpants on. I've got my jacket thing. I'm very soft right now. But also tired because it's been a work day.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, I might fall asleep with how comfortable I am right now, but I'm going to try not to.
Let's hope you can manage to stay awake. So it has been a mostly really outstandingly boring week, but a few things have happened, and I think we can turn them into topics. The first, which is the one we were literally just talking about. Oh, Corbin bringing the big developer energy, the BDE.
The what?
The
Who
BDE.
said that? Oh, it's Austin. Hello.
Yeah, he's actually under the name Austin.
That's great. I know who he is now. Oh boy.
Anyway, so our first big topic, because it just happened to be very, very much popping across our view just at exactly the right time. It is this rumor that Apple is going to, or is working on bringing touchscreens to Macs. Oh, yes. Man. Okay, so I haven't actually read through this yet. I don't know if you have, but I assume all the information we actually care about is in the title. Just
for the most part, let me pull it up again because I had it open on my laptop, not this computer.
Okay, I'll paste the link into chat for some level of convenience.
What did I do to hit the paywall? Do I need to open an incognito tab here? Yep, that worked. Cool. Yeah, so this comes from Mark Gurman, who is the single source for all Apple industry reporting. And he reported that Apple is still testing touchscreens on Macs. They don't know when it will come out. It could be a long time, could be never. They could be testing and realize it's garbage. And it's not really clear like what the form factor would be. He said the current work calls for Apple's first touchscreen MacBook Pro to retain a traditional laptop design, including a standard trackpad and keyboard, but the laptop screen would support touch input and gestures. Over time, Apple could expand support to more of its Mac models. So initial plan is put it on the MacBook Pro alongside all of the other there was other reporting. I don't know if it was today or earlier, but there was other news that Apple is trying to switch to manufacturing more of its own displays, starting with probably the Apple Watch first and then going to other stuff. So that would also factor into this. So
yeah,
interesting stuff.
Okay, so this is actually a weirdly big topic for something that seems pretty simple, but the first thing out of the gate, and I think we both agree on this, is touchscreens on laptops can be okay, but just generally speaking, all you're doing is making your screen really smudgy and probably not using it that often. One of the points that Steve Jobs famously made is it's not very ergonomic. And look, I had a Surface Book. I have to agree. It is not very ergonomic on a notebook, and certainly not on a like desktop monitor or anything like that. It's not ergonomic to have your hand up. You're holding your arm up in front of you, blocking the screen, and touching things and waving your arm about. It actually tires your arm out pretty fast. Well, not fast. I mean, it's not as bad as, let's say, being a classic YouTube vlogger walking around outside holding a DSLR up in your arm. But it does wear you out. Like, it's uncomfortable to do for extended periods. But it is kind of useful in specific circumstances. I will grant that. And the only reason I ever personally used it on my Surface Book, the touchscreen or the stylus, is because the trackpad on the Surface Book was, like most Windows laptops, pretty horrible. It's the only reason I ever used the touchscreen. And even then, I really just made a point of using wireless mouse almost all the time.
Yeah, I was using an Asus Chromebook Flip as my main laptop for, I think, 2 years, a long time ago, like maybe 5 years ago. And then eventually I swapped that out for a Lenovo 2-in-1. Well, I had that, and then I think I went to something else. I think I bought an old Dell laptop or something, but I had that at one point, and then I had a Lenovo 2-in-1 that was just a garbage computer. I didn't have very long, but that had a touchscreen. And then I went to my Dell XPS, which did not have a touchscreen. That was an option, but not on the one I bought. And then I had a Surface laptop for like 3 months until I sold that. So, like, in all those times, again, like, I haven't really ever used the touchscreen in the normal laptop position. I will say I did, like, on Windows, where it puts the notifications at the bottom right corner. So if I quickly see a notification, I can just reach up and whoop, swipe it away. So I did like that. There was a couple little things like that on Windows that I liked, but I never saw use for it in the normal laptop mode. It does make a little bit of sense with the 2-in-1s, where, you know, you flip it around and then you lose the keyboard and touchpad. So you're going to use the touchscreen in that case.
Yeah, that does make a difference.
The report didn't mention if Apple was going to try to do, like, make a 2-in-1 MacBook Pro. It just said that they were going to do a touchscreen. So I don't know. And also, like, even the issue with even the touchscreens on the 2-in-1s is that you still just have usually not that great of a UI for touchscreens, because Windows never really handled that all that well. And Microsoft actually gave up on that pretty much. Like, back in the, like, Windows 8, Windows 10 days, when you flipped it around, it would switch to a different UI for, like, the start menu, and some apps would have, like, larger buttons that it would switch to. But no one really, that just ended up being, like, confusing, and most apps didn't implement support for that, so that mostly went away. So, like, like, Mac OS in its current form, if you just use it on a touchscreen, probably wouldn't be that good. So I don't imagine they would do that. But yeah, I don't know. I have to imagine that Apple wouldn't do this unless they were also planning some kind of software thing to take advantage of it. I don't think they would just show up one day and be like, "Hey, the MacBook has a touchscreen now," and then leave.
Okay, so
maybe they would. I don't know.
I definitely want to address that. But first, really quickly, hello to Scuttlefield and Kilutera. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm saying that one right.
Hello.
Kilutera is surely familiar with this channel for the game streams. Just as a heads up, during the weekday, or during usually Wednesdays, though sometimes it moves a little bit, I do a podcast style show. So yeah, just filling you in. All right. As far as the software side of a touchscreen macOS experience, um, the catch on this is obviously basically no macOS software is ready or has any sort of automatic touchscreen format. And if you're trying to hit really small touch targets that were intended for a mouse, but you're going to use your finger, that's going to go poorly. It goes really poorly.
Good luck clicking those tiny close buttons on Windows. I can barely get that with the mouse.
Right. So yeah, this is definitely one of those things where part of the challenge is software. The counter to that, and I feel like there are, in a weird way, I think Apple has kind of been leading up to this for a long time. In part, you can now run iOS apps on a Mac. And I think to some extent, they're probably foreseeing this as being a little bit of a solution for that. Not that that's going to be the ideal experience, but that it brings some amount of extra touchscreen oriented applications to your Mac display. And therefore, a touchscreen that works with that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like this is also with Chromebooks. We started to get a lot more 2-in-1 Chromebooks when Android apps became a thing, because all those Android apps suck ass on a keyboard and mouse. They're not good.
Most of them.
So if you can, flip the Chromebook around and just use it like a giant Android tablet, they're still not good, but they're a lot easier to use.
Yeah. The other part of it is, and I know probably nobody listening to this has ever worked with Swift UI, but the Swift UI framework, it is really good for building apps that are effectively touchscreen apps anyway. You don't have to. You certainly don't have to build apps that are touchscreen oriented. But the way that it is designed kind of encourages that. And very much it is, I dare say, I think Swift UI was kind of built with the idea of making iOS apps first, but made very specifically so that it would still be friendly to making Mac apps. So, the UI that kind of naturally comes out of it is a little bit more oriented towards iOS, just happens to be friendly to Mac. So developers would still have to build a Mac interface for touchscreens if they're using Swift UI as it is today, but the amount of work they would have to do is a lot easier than anything that would have been built in the past. So, I'm not going to say it would be something you could do in, minutes. It's not like it's a cross-compile kind of thing. But you could take most of the stuff that you write for, let's say, an iOS app or even a Mac app, and probably tinker with it for, for a small app, you could probably do it in an hour or two. For medium-sized apps, you could probably do it in a day, 2 days, week tops. Huge apps, those are still going to take a long time, but yeah, it's not like it would take you months to build out a touchscreen interface. It would take you hours to days for most situations. And that makes it pretty ideal.
Yeah, it would depend a lot on the software and if Apple wanted to go all the way and make a 2-in-1, because I could see a lot of people being happy with a 2-in-1 MacBook Pro with Apple Pencil support. Like, that could be really cool for artist people. Not me. I would not use that, but it would be cool for other people.
Yeah, I honestly, I still really want the trackpad to just be a big stylus surface, but They haven't done it yet.
That could be cool too. Like if it like really the most of the use I got out of 2-in-1s was the couple times it made sense to use the to put it in like tent mode. If I'm watching a movie or something, that's really it.
Yeah, it's a good orientation for it. Just it's weird how much 2-in-1s are supposed to be all about being able to use touch to get stuff done, and I swear I still never see people doing that. Not that I see many people with 2-in-1s, but I don't hear of many people actually using touch on a screen that large as a main input method. Like, it gets used sometimes, kind of like what Scuttlefield says. He doesn't use it a lot, but occasionally it's useful, and he misses it when he doesn't have it. I get that. That totally makes sense. It's just not... It's kind of like a stylus on a Galaxy Note. Most people you ask, they'll tell you that they really love having it, but they barely use it.
Yeah, and this I don't think this point carries too much weight anymore now that we've firmly established that this like post PC era is just dead and gone. That was not going to happen. But I think there is a lot of people, especially younger people, who are mostly used to phones and tablets and would like to see that if they're shopping for a Mac. They might not end up actually using it, but that feels like a justification to me that Apple could be thinking about. But
yeah, and there is a certain degree, though I don't know that they really feel obligated to this, but I think to some extent Apple might be in a position where it's just looking at the sort of the inevitable future. People expect a touchscreen Mac. They may not, they may understand it, they may recognize and realize why that's not a thing, but I think I think it's just understood that in time people are just going to expect to be using a touchscreen everywhere. Every screen needs to be a touchscreen, and I think Apple has to kind of accept that future. It may not be a good one, it may not be where most of your input would go, but it's a future that I think they have to kind of acknowledge. It's just bound to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, like if we're picking things from mobile products to go into MacBooks, I would still really like 5G.
Yes.
Over this, I would get far more use out of a dedicated data connection than a touchscreen. But that's a different thing. Maybe that'll come after Apple figures out how to actually build a modem. That's probably what they're waiting for.
Or some patent wears out.
Yeah, and I know they're gonna the data lines for those are gonna be not cheap, but I'll probably still pay it because it's gonna be cool.
I admit I'm not that concerned with it for myself, but I still want it for everybody else that wants it.
Yes. I do a lot of tethering to my laptop at this point, so that would be cool to just always be on, always working, and potentially faster because they could put bigger antennas in the laptop.
Most likely. So there is one other sort of angle to this that jumps out at me, and it's another kind of expectation, but it's a bit of a sort of coming from the other side of the expectations. It's hard not to acknowledge that we've talked many times about how iPads are obviously being slowly geared up to eventually become sort of laptop replacements. Whether or not they are full-scale laptop replacements and Apple eventually abandons the MacBook Pro or MacBook line entirely, I don't want to go quite as far as predicting that's the case. But I think it's beyond safe to say that Apple is working on trying to get the iPad into a position where people will just actually they'll have to decide which one fits me better. An iPad that I use as a laptop, or a laptop that is just a laptop. And I think if they are approaching that point, if that's a decision they want customers to be making, I don't think one of the decisions they want customers to have to come down to is, well, I can use a touchscreen on my iPad, but I don't have that on my Mac. I don't think they want the Mac to be seen as inferior for something as commonplace as that. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the right choice or the best choice or scenario, but that is a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple already does that. Like there was the rumors a little while ago that Apple was working on a iPad and keyboard bundle for education, and every time you look at like what they're marketing to people who don't want or can't afford a MacBook, it's always like some combination of an iPad with a keyboard. But I don't know if the iPad is going to be a better computer replacement than it is now. I think because for the past couple of years, it's been in this position of like, yeah, the hardware is like really great, but the software isn't that good, and there's not a whole lot of anything happening there still. And anyway, that's a whole other thing. I was trying to formulate an opinion earlier to write. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I was having a conversation whereas we were talking about how there's a lot fewer reasons to try to work from a tablet now because of M1 and M2. Because like I know for me personally, like part of the appeal with working from a tablet for so long and why I tried it on, I have the keyboard attachment stuff for my Tab S6, and before that I had some other ones that did that, was like the battery life was way better, and the screen was really good, and it was always on, and really MacBooks cover all of that now. Like the MacBook is just an iPad running Mac OS with a keyboard. Like it has the advantages of a tablet when it comes to battery life and performance and portability, and no fan, no noise. It uses the same, charging stuff. Like I've got the same Type-C plug that works with my iPad, that works with the MacBook, that works with my Switch, that works with the Galaxy Tab. So it's pretty hard to justify buying an iPad for any kind of productivity work, especially when you need to buy the keyboard separately and then you still get a worse and heavier combined package than a MacBook. Like if you buy, it's a different story if you buy like the base iPad and then like the absolute cheapest keyboard, you're not going to get a MacBook in that price range. But once you get to like the iPad Air or one of the iPad Pros, and then you try to get a keyboard for that, you're well within MacBook money. So you're just kind of buying a worse computer, unless you like. I get like there's and like part of the reason I haven't written it is because I don't like making these declarations where there's a lot of like, oh, but what about this and what about that, and like there is still a lot of reasons to go with a tablet. Like again, I don't do any artwork, but that's a big reason people like iPads. So if I was primarily a digital artist, I'd probably want to work from an iPad more. And there's a couple other reasons like that, but it's a lot harder to justify tablet productivity now, which is an interesting shift.
Yeah, no, I would agree on all these points. It's not really that ideal to try to get things done on a tablet. Not that you can't do it, it's just harder
Clunky.
to do well.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Um,
I've tried to do my current workflow on an iPad, which is like mostly possible because Photoshop is on there and Chrome and everything else. It's just takes a lot longer.
yeah,
And
it's more
it's
taps. It's more
yeah,
engagement to accomplish the same steps.
and it's the screen. For me, it's mostly screen size.
Yeah,
Like
screen size too.
I think if I had one of the iPad Pros, it's like 13 inches or whatever. I could probably do it, but that plus a keyboard is like MacBook Pro money. Like why I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, one other one other incentive for Apple to do this did occur to me. So let's just say hypothetically,
You can talk.
the
I'm getting water.
okay, the touchscreens very likely will not appear on every model. Uh, they will probably only be. I mean, right now it mentions the MacBook Pro in this report. In all likelihood, I think it's only going to be MacBook Pros for a pretty long time, or it might even be like a specific, I don't want to say upgrade, but basically like an option. You can buy a model with or without a touchscreen. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, just hypothesizing ways that it might sell. But the key point here is it's going to cost more. And sure, that's just kind of an Apple thing anyway. But who's going to have to buy this? And I say have to, I don't really mean have to, but who's going to end up buying this? Developers. And if someone out there is saying, oh, but developers make up a very small portion, like they can't possibly drive an incentive. And to that, I would point out this article that mentions at the 2022 WDC, Tim Cook said that there are 34 million registered developers. Now, let's be honest. Some of these are definitely outdated registrations. Some of them are, companies that are registered and every employee is also registered. Even half of them don't do anything. Some of these are browser extension developers who just have to do this so that they can get their extensions on the store. And there are surely many others. But let's just say, for argument's sake, half of these are total BS, not really real developers. Or they're not iOS, Mac developers. But if half of them aren't, that means there's still half that are. That is 17 million people, all of which are going to sit there and go, oh, damn it. I have to get one. I have to get myself a MacBook Pro with a touchscreen so I can test apps. So I can test my iOS apps in the emulator without having to connect a phone. So I can test Mac apps that are touchscreen. So I can test whatever other thing using a touchscreen on the device without having to screw around and reach for another touch-oriented device. That's 17 million people that are instantly going to be saying, all right, how do I budget this? Okay, obviously, most of those people will not be rushing out and buying it day one, but a lot of them will. In fact, I would bank a sickening portion of developers would probably be for very, very first in line to get these. So that alone, I think, is probably incentive for Apple to try this, because it is a guaranteed upsell for a whole lot of people. For professional reasons.
I mean, Apple's kind of good with that, where they make just things that very few people actually need, but people just kind of want it anyway.
Yeah.
Like most of the people who picked up like a Mac Studio, like you don't need that, but people bought anyway because it's cool.
Yeah, it's just speaking as someone with a MacBook Pro with an M1 Max, for real, you don't need a Mac Studio.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much a laptop is linty.
Yeah.
And I didn't even max out the RAM.
Yeah, I just finished writing a somewhat long article basically saying you don't really need, most people don't need more than 8 gigs of RAM on a Mac.
Okay, I still completely and adamantly disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Oh, well, you say most people. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, you say most people, and you use the word need. The arguments for need and most people, yeah, I'm sure I could be argued into agreeing with that, but I still think most people should have 16. More than 16 would be pointless.
16 is nice.
Yeah, 16 is the 16 is the good number to go to.
I'm shocked by how well my 8 gig RAM MacBook Air performs.
Yeah,
it's kind of insane. Yeah, Apple Silicon do be crazy though, and there's still rumors about that Mac Pro with an M2 Ultra in it.
Well, the rumor, there was just a rumor that said it was basically being canceled, and that they are very likely going to just push a new Mac Studio, which is going to basically be the same thing, but with an M2 Ultra.
Well, I'll read this. Mark Gurman wrote this on, what is it, January 8th? So that's actually, that was Sunday. Okay, so that's since the last show. He wrote a long article. A lot of it was about the VR stuff that's being worked on, but he did mention stuff about the Mac Pro or the Mac lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I'll put this in the chat if anyone else wants to read it. So I cite my sources. He said, here's what to expect starting with the Mac lineup. The new MacBook Pros coming the first half of this year will have the same designs and features as the current 14 and 16-inch models, but include M2 Pro and M2 Max chips. He also said, a high-end configuration of the Mac Pro, a model with 48 CPU cores and 152 graphics cores, has been canceled. Instead, Apple plans to release a version with the M2 Ultra, making it unclear beyond the machine's expandability why most people would buy it over the cheaper and smaller Mac Studio. In another disappointment, the new Mac Pro will look identical to the 2019 model. It will also lack one key feature from the Intel version, user upgradable RAM. This is because the memory is still tied directly to the M2 Ultra's motherboard. Still, there are 2 SSD storage slots and for graphics, media, and networking cards.
Outside of his grammatical error with that last sentence, yeah, it sounds pretty credible. Just because, well, and sorry, when I said that they're going to release an Ultra, or sorry, a Mac Studio, yeah, I said it wrong. What I intended to say, basically, they're going to release something that is just like the Mac Studio, but in the Ultra case, or sorry, in the Pro case.
The big souped up one is probably gone. Now we're getting just a slightly better thing.
Yeah, the one thing I guess that's kind of interesting here is, actually, it's not kind of interesting, it's very interesting. It's that it would have a slot for a graphics card, or some way to expand to a graphics card, because that would make it the first of the of any of the Apple Silicon chips that would actually support external graphics. Yeah. And that's kind of actually a big deal, because as far as I'm aware, well, not as far as I'm aware, but that's been a key complaint, is they started pushing external GPUs as a thing just a few years ago for Intel-based MacBooks. And, you know, that was to kind of appease all the people who were saying that they wanted to have a Mac, but they hated being stuck on just sort of upper mid-range ATI cards. And I get it. Like, the ATI cards were very, very mediocre. They've never really been able to compete with NVIDIA, not in practical, true competitive sense. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to sort of put forth external GPUs. Now, of course, support, anyone who paid attention, support for that was always sketchy. It always worked like garbage. Performance out of even the highest end cards was not great. Like, everything about the external GPU thing was kind of a slapdash mistake. But in theory, if they do it right in some way now, or just support external GPUs properly, however it's going to work, that's potentially interesting. It could be motivating for people that actually really need to use like a certain GPU framework, or maybe well, yeah, pretty much for that purpose. Because we'll see if there's ever too many things that push the GPU capabilities of like the M1 Ultra in a Mac Studio. Because holy crap, they just have so many cores in that it is kind of a performance beast. There's just no software really written to make use of it.
Yeah, it is such a funny thought that if they added expandable memory, it would make the computer much slower. Because
yeah, that actually is a thing.
That high bandwidth memory is a hell of a drug. But I honestly, I'm mostly just frustrated that there isn't a good solution for boot camp yet. I really want boot camp. If we can get boot camp, I don't need a PC anymore. That'd be pretty cool. In theory, I wouldn't need one, but
there are a lot of reasons why I agree. I also find myself sitting here just, I feel like it's never going to happen. I honestly, I kind of think boot camp might be one of those things that. Remind me, did they ever promise it was going to happen, or have they even mentioned it?
I'm pretty sure they never promised anything.
Well, yeah, there's that. But Apple does promise things from time to time. Like, they'll actually say something is coming if they're willing to commit to it coming. But truthfully, I really just think boot camp might be dead.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to imagine Microsoft is pushing for it to some degree.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I don't think Apple cares.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to see something like that happen. I think it'd be really funny if like one of the cards you could get for the Mac Pro is like a PC on a card. Because they did do that.
Yes, they did.
Back in the Power Mac days, you could, or that might have been further back. That might have been in the 68K Mac days. But I know they at least one or two times made a physical card that had like an Intel CPU and shit on it, so it could just be a PC on your Mac.
And hello to Carson. Carson brings up Parallels, and I haven't used Parallels myself.
Yeah,
but the answer for the most part is yeah, Parallels and obviously VMware Fusion can both be decent solutions for running Windows, but they're not the same. Like, you do lose some things when you're running in a VM. Not that this is the only thing, but just to throw the example out there. For example, I would never want to do anything that does like let's say over USB firmware updates. Doing something like that from a VM is sketchy. I never, ever should you take that risk. And if something only has its firmware updater in Windows, which holy crap is basically everything. Yeah, that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, like I have Parallels on my MacBook. It's a really cool piece of software. Like it is so good for like normal applications. But it's stuff like that, like you mentioned, and also I want to play video games, and none of those solutions really are built for that. Like I think Parallels maxes out at like DirectX. I don't think they have full DirectX 12 supported Parallels. I think it's either lower or some stuff isn't fully supported. I don't know where VMware is at. I think they're worse, but there's a lot of stuff there that they don't fully support because it's really difficult, and Apple makes it difficult because everything has to be metal. So that would be something that would presumably work better under Boot Camp. It really depends on how much if Windows wants to support it, how well they handle it, because that's also an issue, is that a lot of the cool stuff in Apple Silicon can happen because Apple has fully optimized everything for its own hardware, and Microsoft is not good at doing that ever. So Carson said most Windows games aren't even built for ARM though, right? No, they're not, but the x86 translation layer in Windows it works most of the time. It does support it. It initially didn't support 64-bit software at all, which was a problem, but now it does. So really the only time I ever have issues with it is when I have issues with it for a couple games that are multiplayer that try to detect for like cheat software. Like I have Fallout 76 that will not launch at all, and I'm assuming it's either because it thinks running in a VM is a cheat or the translation layer is a cheat. Both of those like would make sense to me, because both of those at some point involve like changing the executable code of the software to some extent, or acting as a middleman between running that. So but no, like other games work fine in Parallels. Like I've been playing Fallout 3, which is an old game, but I'm playing on like the higher graphics on my MacBook. Again, the MacBook with 8 gigs of RAM. It's running a VM with Fallout running, and it's fine. I played a couple more newer games in there. It's really good, but it doesn't support all the Parallels doesn't have the full graphics stack. That's still missing.
Yeah.
But that would also be a lot of work Microsoft would have to do if they wanted Boot Camp to happen. Like I've been reading all of the progress reports from the Asahi Linux people who are porting Linux to Apple Silicon, and they're having to figure out how the Apple Silicon GPU works because Apple doesn't document everything, and it's all like really custom, and they're having to write a lot of stuff from the ground up. So it'd be a lot of work. I'd still like to see it happen though. And ultimately, like better ARM support is something Microsoft should be working towards anyway, and they are on other things, but not Apple yet.
Yeah, I don't.
It probably. I don't know if it'll happen or not. I would not bet on it. I'd like it to, but yeah. I acknowledge Parallels is fine for like 90% of people.
Yeah, for a lot of apps, it's perfectly enough.
It's really good. It's Parallels on my MacBook is like 1,000 times better than any time I've used VirtualBox on any other computer in my life.
Well,
like it's really good.
Yeah, without question, it's a really good piece of software. It's a really good experience. Well, okay, I'm talking based on what other people said because I haven't used Parallels, but frankly, I used VMware for a long time, and that was way back in the day. Honestly, I'm sure both of them have to be way better than what it was when I last used VMware. So, without question, that's got to be a pretty decent experience. So for basic applications, it's great. It's got to be great. I would I could see doing most things that you need to do just using a VM. There are going to be exceptions, like if you need to run stuff inside of a VM that's running inside of a VM. This is a thing developers might have to do. Obviously, if you're running games, that's a big caveat. Though, you never know. Some games will just play fine anyway.
Fallout 3 is totally fine on my MacBook when I set parallels to full screen, even though it's a game made like 10 years ago on a completely different architecture. And it's a Bethesda game, no less. It's a miracle those work at all.
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
I'm impressed.
So yeah, it's one of those things where it's not hard to point to a lot of scenarios where a VM works. It's not hard to find a few more scenarios where it doesn't. And it's those few more scenarios that, it's kind of like your argument that most people are fine with 8 gigs of RAM. It's true. Most people are fine with 8 gigs of RAM until they aren't. And it's that one time when they aren't that they're suddenly going to go, oh, damn it. Now I really wish I'd paid for the extra. And that's kind of the situation here. Like, for most things, you're probably doing great with the VM. But
I think
there will be exceptions.
I think a lot of the reasons you would also need native Windows on a ARM computer, like a MacBook, would conflate with things you need specifically an x86 chip for, and that can't always serve both purposes. Like if you're, like someone might go like, I need Windows on my MacBook to run a legacy program. It's like, oh wait, no, it was built for x86 and it won't even work on Microsoft's translation layer because it was coded weird or something.
Yeah.
And at that point, you just have to suck it up and buy a Intel laptop. So, yeah, I'd still like to see it happen. I hope it eventually does. If nothing else, then honestly, I feel like Microsoft needs it just so they can have a hardware platform where Windows on ARM isn't a complete piece of shit. Because that doesn't really exist right now. So you'd think they'd want one just to make their compile times faster for the few applications they have running on ARM. They just came out with a little ARM box that kind of looks like a Mac Mini.
Look, I assume almost every Microsoft developer that has to build for ARM is already just doing it all on a Mac. Like every Microsoft developer that's building Android apps, they got a Mac.
Yeah, it's. I mean, all of I was making this point literally earlier today, where I was like, all of Microsoft software is better on Mac. Like Word on Mac is like 1,000,000 times better than Word on Windows. It's just like you can tell the Mac team tries sometimes. And the Windows is just like, it's fine.
It's scary and sad how weirdly true all that seems to be.
Yeah.
But
also there was were you about to change topics on me? Okay, I have one little itty bitty topic, which is kind of interesting, is that Apple has published I don't know if are they still live? Okay, good, they didn't take them down. They published the preview Microsoft Store listings for their new Windows apps. So I think I don't know which event they said it, but at one of the recent events, they confirmed that they would bring a real Apple Music and Apple TV apps to Windows. Which right now for those you either need to use a web browser. I don't know if you can do Apple TV. I think Apple TV stuff has a web client, but I know Apple Music does. So if Windows people either have to use the web clients, and then for like music stuff, they're still stuck with iTunes. So Apple has now released its new separate apps for Apple Music, Apple TV, and Apple devices. And the third one is interesting because I don't remember them talking about it before, but the listing shows that this Apple devices app can be used to synchronize iPhones, iPads, iPods, and iPod Touch. So that covers everything iTunes did. So once this is done, I guess iTunes will just be fully dead.
iTunes will never be fully dead, but it is quite literally the zombies from anything that is not Walking Dead, because those zombies actually in theory do die. But yeah, no, it will go on living somehow for some weird reason. There will still be downloadable versions of iTunes in existence, and possibly even getting updates for some bizarre esoteric need that Apple will never actually solve in some other piece of software.
Yeah.
But yes, the general point of will they be distributing it or recommending it to anyone for any purpose? No. It will finally have no general function for anybody.
They might keep it, or they might like update it occasionally, because right now the listings for these apps have Windows 11 as a hard requirement.
Oh God,
which is interesting. So there's that.
Okay, this is a weird thought, but I wonder if that's something Microsoft encouraged.
Maybe.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are excited by the idea of being able to be done with iTunes, and they probably have been like sort of champing at the bit for these apps to come out, and then to find out, oh, you have to be on Windows 11. I bet a lot of those people are like, oh crap, okay, well, we weren't going to upgrade, but now we will.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't think of any other software that has a hard Windows 11 requirement right now. Not just because like hardly anyone has it compared to all the other versions still, but also that like I don't think there were really any breaking changes with the APIs. Like Microsoft has been distributing all of its libraries just through Windows Update. Like even when they made the new WebView 2, which is the thing Windows apps can use to render web content with the Edge engine, they backported that all the way to Windows 7. So right. Maybe that, because this is also like in preview, you can't even install it yet. People were getting errors when they were trying to install it, so maybe that will change when it's done. But what I'm really curious about is I want someone to decompile this and figure out what unholy programming environment this uses. Like I want to know, is this like some Swift app that's running in like 5 layers of translation, something to run on Windows? Because that was always the really like cursed part with Apple's Windows software back in the day, was when they had like basically Wine but for Mac apps to run iTunes and QuickTime Player on Windows. And like even when you look at the first releases of Safari on Windows back when that was a thing, like it had like the blue Mac OS scroll bars and buttons and stuff. Like it did not look like a Windows app even remotely. and they eventually fixed some of that, but like it was just absolutely horrible. It was part of the reason iTunes was always a piece of shit on Windows.
Part of
So,
the reason.
I'm very curious what these are using, because like these they're they're using some Windows UI elements, or the design language of Windows 11, which shocks me. They're getting better. The Apple Music app has some frosted glass on the top there.
Oh god.
But I don't know. Like, this doesn't look like WinUI, so I don't know what they're. Especially that Devices app, they've got some weird menus on the side there. I don't know what they're using. I want someone to figure that out, because I'm sure it's terrible.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think it'd be very funny if it was Electro.
This really does have a very well. Swift UI would have an easy enough time making this. I bet it actually probably is done with Swift UI. They just built a compilation target for Windows.
Yeah, maybe.
Because Swift is a lot more portable and friendlier to that kind of thing. And by the way, just for reference, since it kind of came up, the current market share for Windows 11 is about 17%. The current market share for Windows 10 is about 68%. And to be fair, Windows 11 is rising, Windows 10 is falling, so getting there. And this is just market share of Windows versions. It presumably does not factor in any other thing like Linux or Mac OS or whatever.
That's higher than I thought it would be, honestly.
Likewise, though, Windows 11 has been out long enough and shipping on new computers long enough that I can see how it would have gotten here. I feel like, I'm sure people have upgraded, but I feel like the percentage of people who've upgraded is probably single digits. I bet it's not enough, but people buying new computers, especially like Surface Pros and the like, I feel like that's where a lot of the Windows 11 versions are coming from.
Yeah, and I don't think Microsoft has been super aggressive with the Windows 11 updates yet. Like, I remember there was a time with, I don't know if it was Windows 7 to 8 or 7 to 10, but there was one of those transition periods. They started getting really aggressive with the auto updating. Like, people would just like come back to their computers after, sleeping at night and show up. They're like, oh, this is on a different Windows version now, and all my drivers are broken. So it doesn't seem like they're doing that yet. Like, when I was at my my family's house over the holidays, I actually updated one of the laptops to Windows 11, so it hadn't like done that there yet. So yeah, that's higher than I thought, but it is probably mostly new computers shipping with it. That was a fun thing I was writing. Yesterday was the official complete end of super extended support for Windows 7, and the end of security updates for Windows 8.1. Windows 8 dropped off years ago.
Yeah.
So both of those are dead. And I had a really funny moment writing that, where I was like, I was like, all right, if you're on those Windows versions, I don't know what you do there. Because like, you can update to Windows 10. That's going to get security updates for 2 more years. So that gives you 2 years to figure out something else.
Yeah.
But
that is the worst version of kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, you're already on the dead platform. Because it's like, there's a lot of Windows 8.1 PCs, I'm sure, that can probably run Windows 11 once you do all the hacks to turn off like the TPM check and stuff. But a lot of I'm probably most PCs earlier than that are gonna be almost impossible. Because really, especially with Windows 7, Microsoft does not make a 32-bit version of Windows 11. They finally stopped 32-bit support. So, sure, there's a lot of really old PCs that are just, got to use Linux now.
Yep.
It's the year of Linux when Windows 7 is dead. I did get a little bit shocked because I was I was looking for something else about Windows 7, and I stumbled upon the Windows 7 Reddit, which was giving me big vibes as the Galaxy Note 7 subreddit, where it's just like a bunch of people like, hey, I'm still using this and I haven't died yet. It's going great.
Look, I'm not going to name names, but we've both worked with somebody who's definitely still on Windows 7. So actually,
it's very funny.
I frankly, I'm surprised that this person isn't still on XP. So,
to their credit, most of them seem to be running the unofficial patch that apparently lets you get the security updates Microsoft was making for corporations still using Windows 7. So like it's kind of like, all right, you're having like, it's like at least you're wearing a condom with Windows 7. That's great, guys.
Okay,
I'm sure.
Just taking that metaphor to the most unpleasant of places, you might be wearing protection, but you're still trying to hook up in like a flop house.
Right.
So
still wrong thing there. You need to.
Yeah. In context, still a bad idea.
Still a bad idea. Don't use Windows 7 anymore. I know it was good in like, I really enjoyed using it in like 2011, 2012.
Yeah, I did.
I had one because I bought my house was all Macs growing up, and then when I got a Mac Mini in high school, at some point I was like, hey, I want to play some Windows games. This runs Windows. So I boot camped him, and like Windows 7 was the newest version at the time, and it was great on that computer. It ran because that was also around the time Mac OS was starting to ignore the fact that hard drives exist and that Mac Mini had a spinning hard disk in it. So Windows 7 was faster with most stuff than Mac OS, and I could play all my games, and it was great. I liked Windows 7 on that computer.
As a longtime Windows developer, it was Windows 7 that made me decide it's time to try Mac OS. An OS that I had spent basically my entire life up to that point hating. I feel like that says a lot about Windows 7 did not leave me with very very positive impressions.
It was still rough. Like yeah. I remember.
Well, it was progressively getting rougher.
Yeah, it was. I remember my biggest issue with it really was Windows Update was still the biggest piece of shit.
Oh yeah,
like it was.
Well, it was like, a good idea. It was a good idea. Yeah. It was a thing that actually did get a lot better at a certain point. It's just it needed to get way better than it was, and less awful.
I vividly remember when I was that was like when I was in high school. The public high school I went to had Windows 7 on all the machines. I think they actually upgraded the year I started there. And I just remember there were so many times people would be just sitting around waiting for Windows to finish installing updates. I remember there were a few computer labs with like really old computers, and the teacher would be like, as soon as you walk in the door, log into Windows because it's going to take a long time to start up. And then I remember my Mac Mini at home, whenever some beefy Windows update would come out, or if I hadn't booted into Windows for a minute, it'd be like, all right, you're installing update 1 of 50 and it might be done tomorrow.
Yeah.
So definitely not perfect.
Yeah. I remember more than once, and and this is even going way back in time. I remember a few times in like various classes walking in, and someone would have started an update on a computer for no apparent reason. And it's like, all right, well, that computer's no good for the rest of the class. Yeah. Go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And yeah, like this was a method some people use for getting out of doing work in class. It's like, all right, you're just going to have to go sit down next to somebody else who's doing the same thing, and you'll share. Because that's how things work. Yeah. Oh, God, that was so dumb. Anyway, speaking of Microsoft,
too.
And the transition that I was going to make a while ago, so at least it's about Microsoft devices. Microsoft has decided to scrap the Surface Duo 3. Terrible, right? What are they thinking? Except, you know, they put out two devices that were both total market failures, and they were on track to put out a third device that was about to be a total market failure. I mean, what were they thinking? How could they have killed this?
Yeah, I didn't use the Duo 2. I reviewed the Duo 1 when I was at Android Police, and I had the phone for like maybe 2 weeks. It was not very long. And I, you know, if I had money for I don't know, these phones have the same thing to me where I need, well, I don't know how to say this in words because my brain isn't working, but basically, like, I liked the concept of these two screen phones more than foldable phones. Like, I think, like, until flexible screens get a lot better,
yes,
that made more sense. Like, I wasn't worried about a piece of sand getting underneath the screen on the Duo, or, you know, turning it on one day and there is just like dead pixels in the center of the screen. Like, that doesn't really happen with,
or even just a naturally occurring crease that keeps getting worse over time. Like, even if it doesn't
that you feel pixels, with your finger when you scroll up and down. Like, no, I'm not paying $1,000 for a phone and getting that. That's silly.
Yeah, that experience is so miserable. And honestly, that is 100% the reason why I wanted the Surface Duo 3 to come out, because I feel like we have had enough iterations of the folding phone that by now I think a lot of those people have to be, well, not a lot. Okay, I take that back. I think a very small portion of those people have to be looking at folding phones and saying, you know what? We tried it. We tried multiple generations of it. It's neat, but it sucks. Like, let's go try something else while they get their folding stuff figured out. And I feel like all those people would have at least wanted to try the Duo 3. Would they have kept it? Would they have actually bought it? I don't know, but I feel like some portion of them actually would have tried this, and now it won't exist. Instead,
like, really.
Well, go ahead.
The first Duo, all my issues with it were not related to the screens. Like, that part was mostly fine.
Yeah, the hardware. Well, honestly, the hardware is hard to get right with this.
It was everything else with that phone. Like,
it was the software.
That phone. Well, the software was a little rough, but really it was the first Duo was delayed a lot, so it had an old Snapdragon chip when it came out. Oh yeah,
you're right.
It also had old Android because, again, like, all that software tweaking took forever. They didn't get, you know, they were slow on the Android OS updates, and also it was just a really weird shape. Like, it was wider than most smartphones when you were holding it, like, in like the folded part, but also shorter. So it was just really weird to hold. And I believe they tweaked that a little bit on the 2, and also the cameras were terrible on the first one. because they didn't want to do a bump, a camera bump. So the cameras on the first one were bad. On the second one, they were like, fuck it, and they put actual good cameras on it, and gave it a little bit of a bump, which is also what Samsung did for the all of their Galaxy Fold phones. Those have, and the Flip, I think. Those all have some camera mounts. So the two looked a lot better, and as far as I remember, it got pretty good reviews. But it's just, if your phone doesn't have Apple or Samsung's name on it, you're in for a tough time. And it was still a lot of money. That's why I didn't get it. And
so, look, you know me. I'm no fan of hardware made by Microsoft.
Right. This has been established. This is in the RambleCast lore.
Yes, it is canon. But, well, actually, no, but. I wouldn't have gotten this phone no matter what. Screw this phone. The thing is, though, and actually, in large part, my biggest problem with Microsoft-made hardware is the thing Carson brings up, which isn't so much the hardware, but it's that their software is really buggy, and the OS updates are always super late. In the case of the Surface Duo, at least the one, literally it was like 18 months late.
Oh yeah,
releasing an OS update.
All the Duos have been really slow. It took forever for, I don't know if the one or the two got it first, but it took a long time for either, because I think, hold on, I'm gonna say this wrong. I know they, hold on, 1 second. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it was the Surface Duo 2 shipped with Android 11. And they were going to update it to Android 12, but then they were like, we'll just wait for 12L. So it didn't get 12, and it took a while for it to get L. I think that was pretty recently. Like pretty close to the release of Android 13 last year. So yeah, they've been slow on that. I know part of the reason for that was that they had a different company working on the Android updates, and eventually they brought those people in-house, so I assumed it would get better, but now I don't know what's gonna happen with the software, because now they're not doing this form factor anymore. Probably won't really need all that stuff, because Android 12L and 13 have a lot of this dual screen stuff in it.
Yeah. So anyway,
and also they were supposed to make a bigger one of these running Windows, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, that was never going to happen. So the thing is, though, I like the idea, and I really do think that this is the thing that probably should have been successful. Not this, literally not this one, because, again, Microsoft supported it like garbage, but a dual screen phone, I think, would have and probably should have been the thing that took off for a while before folding phones. We should have been looking at folding phones with like a distant vision of what would eventually supplant the two screen phone. Not these two things running side by side with basically just one really bad company producing this thing, which just should have been the thing that existed for now. So I think that is unfortunate, but it's the way of trends. And Microsoft is reportedly switching to a foldable phone. Whether it's going to be named the Duo 3 or something else, they don't know yet, or rather the report doesn't have any information. And chances are they just made this decision and probably haven't figured out their marketing choices yet.
Yeah.
Regardless, Microsoft is going to keep making this, and no doubt they're going to they're going to be using someone else's screen tech, which likely means it is going to get creases, and it's going to have all the exact same problems as every other folding phone. But
and it will probably
it's going
be
to have
worse
crappier
than
software.
Samsung's.
Yeah, it won't be as good as whatever Samsung's current will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Microsoft doesn't own the world's leading display company.
Nope.
So.
And even if they get their screen from Samsung, Samsung won't give them the best screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, honestly, I don't think there's any possible way that Microsoft's first foldable phone is going to be good in any measure. Like, it is going to be a worse screen than any other folding phone that comes out at around the same time. It's going to be worse hardware in pretty much every way. It's going to be worse software in every way, for almost guaranteed. Like, it is going to be a terrible phone, and the really sad part is it's probably also going to be the most expensive of all of them, because Microsoft is going to charge way too much for it, just like they tried to do with the Duo until they fire sold it.
Yeah, and this report also says that Microsoft's experimenting with working on other Android phones, some of which are just normal phones, and there's a bigger strategy of trying to make an Android experience that ties in better with Windows, which is something they've been doing with Samsung for a while. Like, when you use a Samsung phone, it supports everything in the Windows 11 and Windows 10 phone hub integration thing, because some of that stuff needs like actual OS level integration. It can't just be an app, which that could be. I mean, that should be easy to sell if you can make like a pretty decent normal Android phone and make it work like flawlessly with Windows PCs. That could be interesting. But yeah, we'll see. That seems like it's probably far out. And the Surface Duo has not given me much. If they're making a normal phone, then my expectation now is you have to be pretty good on the software. And I'm not totally sure if Microsoft is capable of that with Android phones yet. Like, if you're making an Android phone, I would expect timely major OS updates, and they haven't done that ever.
Nope.
With any of the Duos, so we'll see. I need Jitsi to stop showing me a pop-up saying I can use my iPhone SE camera as the webcam. I don't want to do that. Maybe if I move the phone farther away from the computer.
It's funny that it's trying to give you that offer.
Yeah, I've noticed. I saw someone. It just did it again. I saw someone complaining about that with Discord, I think. Like, it kept trying to be like, Discord detected iPhone microphone. Do you want to use that? Because like all the software is built where you're just like, if you're plugging in a microphone, it's like explicit. Whereas all the new iPhone Mac integration is just kind of it happens without you thinking about it.
Yeah. So, speaking of companies that have released products that were just doomed to fail, do you want to guess where I'm going with this one?
There's a lot there.
Well, I'm talking about Stadia. This will be a quick one, and then we'll move on. I promise this will not take a lot of time. But yeah, Stadia. We now have an official, literally, deadline. It is apparently going to die as of 11:59 Pacific time, or sorry, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, January 18th. So, yeah, that's a thing. They're giving it the official boot right then, unplugging the cables, turning off the lights to the server room. It's over. Anybody who worked for Stadia will be officially hung at that time, and the streams will begin at exactly midnight, just so you know. They will not last long. But in the meantime, for those who care at all, there are a few games that you can download your save files for, and in a few cases, if you're really interested in it, you can actually even get to keep playing the games on other platforms for free. Like the companies, apparently Google paid the companies and they didn't ask for the money back. So the companies like Ubisoft in particular feel like, hey, we got paid, you have a license to the game, just for PC. So yeah, that's a thing. If you make a point of signing into your Ubisoft account on those games, then you can they will sync across accounts and you can get them for PC. They say that there are 5 games that doesn't count for, 3 of which are just dance titles, and I forget what the other 2 are, but who cares? In my experience, this is actually not true. I went through all of the Ubisoft games, and I forget which one, but one of mine refused to sync. I signed it in. It was it even showed progress, but it doesn't show as having synced. So I think that was Watch Dogs. Pretty sure it's Watch Dogs. Anyway, so yeah, that's about that. Do you have feelings about Stadia?
No,
I didn't think so. So yeah, that's a thing. Oh, and I will say I am kind of sad that after all this time, the game that brought so many people to Stadia in the first place, Cyberpunk, still never actually managed to get its DLC out before Stadia died. Like, that was the one thing I was pretty sure one of these days I would get to play the DLC for Cyberpunk 2077, and they somehow managed to miss even that extremely low bar. Congratulations, CD Projekt Red. You failed at the basics.
Yeah, and what was I gonna say? Never mind. My mind just shut off.
Okay.
Continue.
Well, then the good news for that is we're switching to the other Google topic, which you want your brain off for anyway.
What did Google do?
That is the thing about Google accidentally revealing an upcoming device that will launch with Fuchsia.
Oh, that.
So
Yes.
I don't have a lot to say on this. All right, the quick rundown of this is apparently the Fuchsia team supposedly accidentally revealed a bit of a plan report that effectively said that they are working on JavaScript support to effectively be apps and control settings in the OS, etc., and that they needed this to be done, quote, by first half of 2023. I think the wording of that is open to interpretation, but 9to5 is convinced that means by the end of the first half of 2023. I would think it's already the deadline, but hey, again, each has our interpretations. And apparently this will be because the first device that is going to have a factory build, including Fuchsia, is supposed to be in manufacturing sometime after that. That is the purported result of this. There's a lot of there are so many takeaways to have here, but the one that stands out to me most is this. If this is their milestone, that this is the first time a device is going to come off the factory floor with Fuchsia, notably after they've updated 2 other devices to run on Fuchsia, one when they originally shipped with something else. The fact that this is a milestone for them, like, I almost want to rename it to an inch stone. It is such a trivial achievement to say, hey, we're already running other devices on it, but now we're gonna put it on to ship with it. That's not an achievement, guys. It's not special to me. It feels like Fuchsia has become the perfect example of a side project that nobody wants to use, but they feel obligated to shove it onto a few things because they spent so much time and money developing it. And maybe it's good. It should be. By now, dear God, this thing has to be decent, right? Somebody confirm that this logic makes sense. It has to be decent at this stage. I just don't... If it's decent, if it's good, why the hell isn't it on, like, at least every Nest device? Or every reasonably newish Nest device. Why isn't it more broadly spread out? Why isn't it rolling out to other things that shipped with other OSs? Like, come on. This is something that should be basic. And
Yeah,
yes, exactly what Carson said. The fact that they updated existing devices to switch the OS is way more impressive than the fact that they're going to finally start shipping something with this. It's just not special. Go ahead, Corbin.
I have 2 thoughts. Number 1 thought, the complaint about this not being a major milestone. I would say that's more of a issue with the report of it rather than the action, where really nothing has ever been in public about this, so really just anything that anyone can find about this project is kind of noteworthy in itself. Like my second thought is that I'm not sure I can think of a whole lot of other projects where a large, well, I'll say tech projects to narrow it down. I can't think of many other tech projects where there's been this long of a development period with so little visible usefulness or deployment. Like, I still don't really get the reason for this, and I know I haven't, like, looked into this a ton myself. How to Geek is not on the Fuchsia OS news beat, nor was XDA when I worked there, but I don't really know why Google needs to make its own operating system like this, especially like
another operating system.
Yeah, like I know, like, part of the initial sell was to have like a real-time kernel, but I believe that's gone now. And so, like, I don't know what this is for, because I know also supposedly the usefulness of this is not on any of the platforms it's on. Like, it seems like Google has kind of just been using the Nest Hub and stuff as like a test bed to see if this stuff works before they put it on more important things, but they haven't done any of that yet, and it's not clear what benefit it would have on the more important things than what's there now. Like, what would be the benefit to replacing Android on the Pixel phones with Fuchsia? What would that do? And I don't know if it really would do much. But I don't know. I'll keep, I'll pay attention to it, but there's nothing yet that seems all that interesting. And it's kind of weird that this has also been like a thing that Google doesn't really talk about anywhere. It's just kind of that they dump the source code, and even though it's a project that they've been working on for years, like literally the first article I wrote at Android Police was about like some initial work on Fuchsia, and that was in 2016.
And
so,
I think back to when Ron Amadio covered it for Ars Technica. One of the things he had or showed off, well, wait, maybe it wasn't the first round, but it was still pretty early in Fuchsia's public visibility. They were already running pretty decent apps on it. It supported Flutter apps out of the gate. It supported...
Yeah, they had like a test UI running.
Yeah.
Like the kind of stuff you see on a lot of embedded stuff when they're pretty far in development.
Yeah.
Like if you can get a UI rendered that like you can interact with, that's pretty impressive.
And they were in the process of bringing Android APKs to it, or some degree of APK support. And they were promising a few other languages would be supported basically day one. Or not day one, but like they were working on development for runtimes that would support these languages. That was years ago. And here they are apparently working on getting JavaScript-based apps going. Like, really? This feels like... It feels like... to bring a good classic analogy, it's sort of like... Or an analogy you'd be familiar with. It's kind of like saying, hey, guess what? We put people on the moon. Now look at us as we're trying to just get people to the edge of our atmosphere. Like, it's the thing that we accomplished decades ago, and then the thing that a bunch of companies were trying to reproduce just a few years ago with billionaires. Like, they literally are regressing their goals, it seems, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is literally falling back to the easier thing that they probably already had, but somehow don't have. I mean, I don't... Yeah. I feel like this report, if you actually look at what Fuchsia is and what has been previously announced, this is basically them saying, yeah, everything we had just was a neat tech demo, and none of it was ready. And so now we're actually doing the stuff that we need, what we should have done years ago. Which also makes me wonder how many people are even working on Fuchsia, like either full-time or at least actively. And how many people are just sort of dropping in to toss a commit that direction once every few months. It feels like Fuchsia has to be moving at a snail's pace, given how little has happened in the last several years. And we're to the point where you can actually use the word several to describe, or several years, to describe how long Fuchsia's been in development.
Yeah, and I don't know. I also kind of get the impression that Fuchsia is just a testing ground, and if something seems cool and they get it working there, then they try to backport it to Android or the Linux kernel.
Very possible.
So maybe it's just a pet project that will forever be on like 3 devices, and that's okay, and Google still gets something worthwhile out of that, maybe. But yeah, like I will say I was not impressed with the Fuchsia update on the... I have a first gen Nest Hub, and it slowed to a crawl after that update. Like it barely works now.
I have one of those too. It's right beside me. I'll agree that it's slowed down a tiny bit, but I don't feel like it's slowed down a lot. Not the way you're describing.
I don't know.
But
Maybe I need to reset mine or something. But mine's, whenever I do a voice command, it takes like a good second for like anything to happen on the screen. It does catch everything, but like it's just the display and animations are very, very high latency.
Okay, I guess I don't think mine is as bad as yours, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's there. Just I think mine is less encumbered than yours. So yeah, maybe try a reset.
Yeah,
I might
honestly
I have to try that on mine someday too.
You know, honestly, I might just replace it with a kitchen timer because that is its only use. I ask it to make timers, and it sits in the kitchen, and that's its only job. And sometimes I'll yell for it to turn on and off these lights back here that I have plugged into a smart outlet, but any number of other things can also do that are almost within earshot because I live in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah. To be fair, mine is really just in terms of interaction, it's basically just light switch. I use it for voice commands, but I do also use the touch interface to turn the light on. So, to be fair, I am using the touch interface for at least that much. And then the screen I do like because it shows time, temperature, and the AQI, which is given the constant wildfire situation
right
every summer has actually been nice.
Given climate change, yeah.
Oh, given West Coast wildfires, let's be honest, this is its own unique issue.
Yeah, I remember when I bought mine originally, it was I also had it on my desk, and it was mostly just like a cool photo frame.
Yeah.
And when I liked, again, it wasn't ever good for this, but I did get to the point where sometimes if I'm like playing a game or something, like just where I'm sitting there waiting for stuff to happen, I might have like Netflix running on the Nest Hub.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't ever good for that because like I can't like change. It's just the player,
and it's a pretty tiny screen.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's always been a thing that like I don't really have a. It's not really good at what I wanted to do. If they ever added, like I always wanted them to add support for like calendar, like show me what's. I know that they like kind of eventually did with like the widget thing, but that took them forever, and also it's still pretty limited.
Yeah, there's a lot of features that logically should be there, and a lot of things that are built into, that are sort of built into Google's services that they can do. I knew that was going to trigger. There's a lot of stuff that's built into their services that they should be able to reach into and make good use of, but they just never do. And yeah, it's a problem. There's so much that they could do with this thing, and they haven't.
Yeah, so it's just been a continued disappointment, and now most of my stuff is in Outlook, so I can't even do the calendar stuff on there if I wanted to because it only supports Google things.
Yeah, but that's your fault.
Yeah,
but no, the irony is, if a day ever comes that they open up the API to allow third-party development, there's like an 80% chance that you're going to get a fairly good Microsoft-made widget that appears on this thing that accesses Outlook perfectly, while it will be there will be weird little third-party mediocre things made by like independent developers that access Google stuff, but Google itself won't do it.
Now the next Nest Hub is gonna be an Android tablet, so like none of this matters.
Yeah.
And again, it's like what? Okay, yeah, like what are we doing with Fuchsia now? Now Google's gonna have 3 completely different operating systems on things in the same
basic form factor. Ish. I mean,
that's such a Google moment.
It really is. Well, sorry. Just to be clear,
I'm shocked they don't have two web browsers at this point, honestly.
Well, I mean, they actually kind of did. If you want to count the Android web view, which was very definitely distinct from Chrome, but they did eventually decide, oh no, we're gonna stop pretending, we're just gonna make it Chrome.
Yeah. It's still a little different. Whenever I see I look at the forum posts on the whatever Google group it is where they talk about features that are in testing for Chrome, and they always have to specify, no, this will not work in the web view because of this reason.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of specific stuff there.
But yeah, just to clarify, when I said three different, the same form factor, what I meant to say is the same product line. Technically, these are all, well, even then, it's going to be the Pixel tablet, but it's going to be a Pixel tablet that you're supposed to dock to something that looks, in the end, exactly like a Nest Hub. So I'm counting it as a matching product line, even if it's not exactly. Anyway, Austin said Google moved development behind closed doors, but they didn't necessarily regress anything with Fuchsia. I'm going to not object to this, but I am going to say the two things that we do know, while they may not technically be regressions, they sure as hell feel like it. And not, well, one feels like a regression, the other one I think is just the exact complaint I made before. The thing that feels like a regression is very literally they were working on, or they had working versions of several different programming environments running on Fuchsia, and here they are, like, slow out of the gate trying to get JavaScript working. So is it a regression? No. But is it significant to say, like, they already had several things working? Why is JavaScript the one that they're now trying to sort out? Like, could they not get things working in Flutter? Could they not get things working in Java? Could they not, or, well, Android APKs? Could they not get Kotlin working? Could all these other languages not do a thing JavaScript can do? I think we know the answer. And then my other point, I feel like if this operating system was in any way successful, it should be on more devices by now. And maybe it is. Like, maybe there's internal stuff. Maybe Google's doors and security systems and all these other things might be running Fuchsia. We just don't know it. Maybe that is where their value is coming from. They built this and it's running a ton of things inside their offices and campuses. It's a possibility. But right now, just from the outside, based on what we know, this sure as hell seems like a thing that they spent a lot of money on just so it could replace an operating system that they're actually still developing and using on other devices.
Yeah, I just, again, like, I don't want to, like, go too far into this point, because in a way this has been hyped up far beyond what, like, Google is willing to talk about. Like, this is sort of like trying to imagine, like, what the next, like Star Trek movie will be, where, like, little bits keep getting leaked out, and then people are kind of disappointed, but it never, like, it's never been in a presentable form, and I don't want to, like, judge it really until it gets to that point. So it's weird just talking about it. But I guess my main issue with all of this is every time in recent computer history that I'm aware of, like, every time there's some big platform change like this, it's because there's, like, a very obvious benefit. Like Windows switching to Windows NT. There was a very clear benefit of, like, we need to, like, when you have actual 32-bit code here, We need the drivers to work actually. We don't need to have, DOS as a kernel anymore. The same thing with Mac switching to a Unix core. Like, all that made perfect sense. But I don't see how a phone or a tablet or a computer with Fuchsia would be better than, in the phone's case, Android. Because I know,
that's one I feel like I can not strongly defend, but I do agree with one of the narratives. Well, and I think I was possibly one of the first people to theorize this as a narrative. Not the first. I'm not remotely taking credit for it, but I believe it was one I latched onto early, which was Fuchsia won't have a lot of the sort of the backlog of errors, the assorted flaws that Android had as a result of how it was originally built. And they were building for different hardware needs. They rushed a lot of stuff and didn't necessarily make good decisions, and a lot of those things they were kind of locked into. And I was a big believer that Fuchsia was probably learning from a lot of those mistakes, or the result of having learned from those mistakes. So I think they did put out something that was optimistically going to be an improvement in many of those ways. And if you ever want to hear about some of those mistakes, literally just listen to the Android Developers Backstage podcast and listen to Chet Haas and a few of the other Google developers talk about the early days of Android. Oh my god. Some of the things that they had to do were absolutely just... they laugh about how bad some of the decisions were.
But a lot of that's been, worked out.
They've worked out some of it, but a lot of it just... it's still there. And or it's either still there or they're kind of locked into a few of these things because there's now stuff that depends on things operating a certain way. Not that they can't change some of that, but it's a long way out. Right. And the Androids book is also a good source of this type of these types of stories. But Fuchsia had the promise of being a replacement for those things. So that's there, but... Yeah, and... but that's a small thing. Fuchsia, to your point, Fuchsia doesn't seem to be offering anything that really fixes any of the existing platforms that they have. Right. At least not in a way that they couldn't fix those platforms to solve.
Yeah, because when I think about issues that exist with Android today, I don't really think there's a lot of technical things that are at least from a user standpoint. I don't think there's a lot of technical issues with Android that affect the overall experience. I think it's all corporate bullshit stuff, right? The fact that, Android phones have a fixed lifetime because Qualcomm decides not to support them for that long, and there's stuff like that. So I don't... this is kind of when people talk about really weird tech solutions to stuff like solving world hunger or trying to end poverty in the US with very technical... this is a way of thinking that is in a lot of other categories where it's okay, we can engineer our way out of this, but it's no, that's not... you're going at this from the wrong perspective. This is a organizational problem, not a technical one. And I think that's kind of where Android lands. Android, it's had over 10 years of updates now. The past few have been almost entirely just cleaning up technical cruft. Removing old APIs, putting new ones in to kind of replace them. But a lot of the issues left are just Qualcomm doesn't want to do a thing. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to make a new OS that's like Windows where the drivers are separate? Because that doesn't work that well. And there's a reason why whenever Google tried to suggest that to the Linux kernel people, they were like, no, go fuck off. We're not doing that. And then they had to make this whole Project Mainline thing to support this, literally just because Qualcomm is evil. And MediaTek and all the other, companies that make system on chips for Android phones. So, like, I don't think, I don't know if this is a Fuchsia's solution to this, but again, like, it's really, I really don't like talking about this at all, because it's like speculating on something we've seen like 5% of, and we, like, this entire time we don't know what the end goal has been. Because like,
Yeah.
if Google came out 5 years ago and said, yes, this will be on phones, then I would be comfortable sitting here and be like, wow, Google fucking sucks. What are they doing with it? But no, like, this entire time, it's just been a thing that, like, Google's been quietly dumping code for, and not really wanting to talk about in public all that much. So I don't know. Again, maybe like this was all just a test bed and they've got what they want out of it, and they still have some people working on it just as like a backup thing, because there is real, like, that's a thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's what Tizen was. Like, back when Samsung was like, I don't know if this Android thing is going to work out. Google's kind of being pushy on us. We might, we're going to keep Tizen in our back pocket. I would
argue Samsung definitely wanted Tizen to happen, but
oh yeah,
they were just very bad at it, and the product people recognized it was not working. The developers were convinced, and the CEOs were likely very optimistic about it, but the product people at the end of the day had to be like, we can't sell this thing.
Yeah, and like, I'm working on the next like Internet Explorer episode for Tech Tales, and I got to the point in the timeline where AOL bought Netscape, and then they went to Microsoft and they're like, hey, give us a really good deal on Internet Explorer licensing, or we'll just use Netscape for everything we run. And Microsoft gave them a really good deal on Internet Explorer licensing, and then they fired all the Netscape developers, and they gave $2 million to Mozilla, and that's how we got Firefox. So, like, that kind of thing does happen. So if Fuchsia is just like a we'll see kind of thing, maybe it's working fine. But again, the dynamic there is different because Google is also putting money into Android, and they basically fully control Android as a technical platform. It's really, again, just the organizational stuff with partners that they can't fully control, and that wouldn't be solved with Fuchsia either, probably.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this before in slightly more abstract terms, but one of the things that has kind of been kicked around is what if the day came that Google decided to abandon Android for whatever reason? And we could speculate the potentials of this all day long, but at the end of the day, could they abandon Android and start pushing Fuchsia? Yes, absolutely. There is nothing technically stopping them from doing that, at least not in any sort of legal or practical sense. It's just a matter of making it work in a way that is compatible with Android. Plain and simple. Would there be some unhappy partners and companies? Hell yeah. Would there be some technical issues? Yup. All these things are predictable, inevitable, and so on and so forth. But in the event that, let's say, it becomes a power play to, let's say, sort of shove off those non-partners who keep developing Android, their own Android products without them being Google-based, it could be, they could do that kind of thing. Or maybe it would become a issue with, let's say, the US government. Maybe the government decides somehow to put pressure on Google to not share Android anymore. And since that's basically an impossibility, they could move over to Fuchsia. These are not impossibilities, they are plausible. Not likely, but that is a thing that could happen. Yeah, Fuchsia is Google's backup, which it very well could be. Maybe this is just that extra side gig project that everyone works on just in case, and one day some developer might pop up and say, oh hey, I have a great idea for using this thing that we've been working on with no other purpose, and all of a sudden it becomes really important to them. And in the years to follow, every developer will very quietly just kind of nudge, wink, wink, admit that they had no idea what was ever going to be done with this OS, but publicly they were going to say, oh yeah, it was the plan all the time. We don't know. Obviously we don't know. But again, what stands out to me is we have these various snapshots in time. And based on the snapshots that we've got, this is really unimpressive performance. They're not progressing at the rate that you'd expect. And it seems like they're actually getting hung up on things that probably shouldn't have been things to get hung up on. And that's what makes the snapshots weird, is they feel like they're out of order.
Yeah, and like I could see them still working on Fuchsia if they think this is going to be the core of what every Google product will do, because that's worked really well for Apple. Like Apple has the exact same core OS on everything. Well,
yeah, that one's a stretch. Apple wants you to think of it that way. I wouldn't go that far, but close-ish enough.
Yeah, but like I don't know. Again, like this goes back to the thing of like I don't think there's any significant technical problems here. I think it's completely organizational. Their issue with Android is business politics and the fact that they don't make the chips that the phones go on, so they don't have as much say there as maybe they'd want to. And internally, the organizational issues that they don't really have. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's just like no roadmap for any of Google's OS projects except maybe Android, or like what the long-term plan is for, because like this has been the thing that frustrated me so much with Chromebooks is everything's like haphazard. Right? Like Chromebooks, you're expected to, first it was like, okay, now it's it's just a web browser, but then people were like, I want more than just a web browser. So they put Android apps on there, even though most of them ran terribly. And then they spent all this effort trying to make them technically run. But the issue at that point, and still is that most of them aren't optimized for that form factor. They look like shit when they're on a 10-inch screen. So then they were like, oh, we still need more. So it's like, okay, great. We're going to put Linux apps on this, which also don't fully work. And we're also going to spend a lot of time building a custom virtual machine so they almost kind of work right.
Which is doubly funny because they're literally they're going to a lot of effort to run Linux apps on Linux.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, I that part is like, fine, whatever. Like that's... Like if you need to containerize like Linux apps which are not built for that, fine. Like okay, it's just like I just see Google over and over again go through so much technical work, and I don't for like a result that just isn't good. Like it really feels like Google is just entirely run by engineers who want to work on cool stuff, because all this stuff is pretty cool. Like all the stuff with like virtual machines they've done to make Android and Linux work okay on Chrome OS is actually very impressive. Whenever I used it, I'm like, this is cool, but none of these apps work that well. I just kind of want a normal computer now.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, like I don't know.
Have we considered the possibility, just a possibility, and before I say exactly what it is, let me start by reminding you of things like all of Google's different messaging apps, all of Google's different note-taking apps, all of Google's different ways of doing to-do lists, and pretty much everything else that has ever had like 2 to 6 versions simultaneously. You know, the thing is, Google doesn't have 2 mobile operating systems. It doesn't have 2 desktop operating systems. It doesn't have 2 of any operating system, really. But they do have 2 of every operating system, because Fuchsia could be a mobile operating system. It could be a desktop operating system. It could be an embedded operating system. It could be literally all these things. So maybe they know they have a problem with always having 2 projects or more for every single thing, and they just sat down and said, you know what? We know how to hack ourselves. We're gonna make a single operating system that can be everything all at once, and we just won't release it. That way, all of our other operating systems will continue to be the lone thing that we release, while we have this other thing that just, it fills our need to have one more thing. I feel like this is absolutely impervious logic.
The same logic that leads you to like a giant tower thing for your cats. It's like, yeah, just don't. I'm gonna give you this so you don't fuck up the couch again.
Yeah.
Google is a cat.
It's scary true. But yeah, for you know, it's not that I think it okay. So we obviously, I've been banging on Fuchsia quite a bit. Corbin has taken a few pot shots here and there too. And Austin, I think, has kind of accidentally been cast in the role of defending Fuchsia and Google. Not very much. Believe me, I'm not actually putting you in that position. But yeah, the reality is, I'm more criticizing, again, like the snapshots we're seeing, what becomes publicly visible, and how little seems to be coming of a project. Obviously, I don't actually care. It doesn't matter to me. Quick disclaimer, I do own a very, very, very tiny portion of a single share of Google stock. So I guess technically I do care very, very deeply. Google, stop screwing around and find a way to make your stock price increase. Let's see, how much would it have to increase for me to actually make any money out of this? A lot. So
well, as someone who unfortunately owns Warner Brothers Discovery stock, I hope Warner Brothers can get an app on Fuchsia.
Oh God.
To really lock in that market share of 3 people at Google.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a mistake. It's gonna take me a while for that to recover.
No kidding, especially now.
Oops.
Though you never know with the way the stock market works. Who knows? You could suddenly be holding.
Literally, yep.
Your stock could suddenly be as valuable as like Tesla's stock in a. Oh wait, never mind. It might be very soon.
Yeah, I just need Reddit to manipulate the Warner Brothers stock next time.
No, see, I was making fun of the crash of Tesla's stock, but
okay, yeah, which has been very entertaining. I hope that continues.
Is that still in free fall? I haven't looked in the last few days.
I think it went up a little bit. Let me see. Tesla. Nope. Well, okay, it's gone up a little bit in the past week. In the past week, it's up 12%, but year over year is still 64.9% down.
Which, to be fair, if you look at almost every major tech
everything
company,
has gone down. Yeah,
they've all gone down about 65 to 70%. Somewhere in that, 60 to 70%. Somewhere in that ballpark.
it hasn't.
So
Yeah, it hasn't been that much.
that's not that
Google
unusual,
is.
but it's very specifically the last month has looked really bad for Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely fallen much harder than everyone else. Like when I look at so if I go to Tesla, oh nope, I can't type Tesla. Tesla last 3 months, or last year, Tesla in the past year is down 65%. If I go to Google, they are down 33% in the same time period, and Apple is down 23%. So Tesla's doing much worse, but yes, everyone went down. Because inflation do be like that though, and also inflation and the Federal Reserve making all the economicists scream do be like that.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
but
just to show you all this is completely made up.
it is. It is literally
None of
just
it.
gambling on a system that doesn't even have real rules.
It's great. This is until 8 months ago, this was my only form of retirement, is gambling on that.
Well, and it's doubly funny because they don't have any real rules. A whole bunch of people are allowed to play the game by completely different rules. And very importantly, if you don't play by the rules the correct way, you can be arrested and thrown in prison for it. But it's still all made up.
Yes. It's a cool thing, but yeah, I don't know. I'm really frustrated. Not really with Fuchsia again, because I don't know what's going on there. They could decide next week that they're going to unhide everything, and it turns out to be really cool, and I'll eat my words, and that's totally okay. I love doing that. But I am frustrated just with the broader thing of where Google can't really decide what to do ever. Especially with like Chrome OS is such a great example.
What was
they really are like, you know what if we just put 5 virtual machines in the operating system, that will fix everything. Just it's like the running joke about like police funding. It's like, no, just one more cop, bro. One more cop will fix everything. It's exactly like that, but for virtual machines in Google. Just one more VM, bro. One more VM. One more CH root.
Yeah, it's a little hard to believe that it just keeps being this. We just keep
and Microsoft is doing that a little bit too. Yeah, not quite to the same extent because their mobile efforts completely failed. But like Windows 11 has the, on Windows 11 you get the subsystem for Android, which is also very impressive. Like whenever I used it, I was like, wow, this is pretty good. And they have the subsystem for Linux. But neither of those, those are both things that like most normal people don't need to interact with. Whereas on Chrome OS, if you want a good photo editor, you almost certainly have to use either an Android app or something on Linux.
Yeah.
No one needs to install WSL on Windows to run like normal software.
And that to me is still the biggest red flag for using Chrome OS is the fact that you either have to install some other platform's version of software to do a lot of things, or there's no or. You pretty much are stuck with that. Like there still are not solutions for Chrome OS for most things.
No, that's
at this point there literally actually are there websites where you might go to do some basic video editing. Sort of. We're not talking traditional video editing, more just sort of like pre-built packaged effects and stuff like that. But like that's actually that's a closer solution than anything that actually runs native. And Chrome OS still just, from my perspective, from where I sit, Chrome OS just seems like such a pointless thing. And I get that people like it. I'm not judging anyone for liking it. It just feels like they made something that didn't need to exist. It has a single core fundamental idea that is awesome, and everything that happened after that just seems like admitting, hey, our core idea was neat, now let's prove that everyone should overlook everything that's wrong with this so that they can keep using a core idea that isn't even really true anymore. That core idea, of course, being the whole, like, you could throw your Chrome OS laptop in the river, go buy a new one, and be set up minutes later, and everything's copied over or whatever. Like that fundamental core idea doesn't really exist anymore, and everything else that they've done to make that work just isn't. It's not good enough.
It's literally just the Linux distro for your elderly family members.
Yeah,
that is what this is for.
Which is honestly a great thing. I think that is a fantastic thing. I want that to be the thing. But it bothers me that there are people out there
until they install a Chrome extension that changes everything. Until they install malware Chrome extension.
Yeah. Well, it bothers me that there are people out there who are like, hey, what Chromebook should I get for my kid? It's like, no, don't get your kid a Chromebook. Get your kid a computer that they can one day become.
Get them an iPad. That's a real computer.
Honestly, closer. But get them a freaking Windows laptop so that they can still play games and stream and become rich Twitch players. Like, do something that's useful for them. Don't get them Chrome OS. No kid is going to be better off with Chrome OS. Sorry. And yes, I fully understand the argument that the kid obviously would be better off with Chrome OS because you don't have to worry as much about malware, but that's not the point.
And you don't need to worry about malware with Linux because it doesn't have any software.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
I'm kidding.
No, you're not. Can we get Jacob in here to argue?
I'll argue with myself. I can do that.
Oh, honestly, I just... Somebody clip that so we can show it to Jacob. Nobody knows who I'm talking about, but he's on a private server with us, and he would be very furious to hear Corbin say these words.
I just really want Google. I just want Google to try. It's so frustrating. I think that's part of the reason I'm like, hey, this Apple stuff's pretty good. Like, they figured out like this whole AirTag thing, and I don't have 7 virtual machines running on my computer. Instead, I just have 30 million ARM chips that all have their own little dedicated, processor core. It's great.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Apple, obviously Apple has made a lot of products that suck. Like a mouse that has to be turned upside down to charge. But they've also, like, the products that they do right, they've done really right. They did really, really well with some of them. And it's weird to see other companies not taking some of those cues a little more seriously.
It's literally just like it's just purely organizational. Like, there's just something with Google. I don't know. I know, like, people like to speculate, like, maybe it's the thing where, people have to, like, launch a product to get promoted or whatever. I don't know if it's that or not. But there's just some, like, Google just they can't they can't do it. It's really frustrating. And they just have this operating system that's just been under development for forever. I don't know what it's for, and no one really does, and it's just kind of there.
Yeah, I've decided it is definitely just so that they have their a fake OS to work on that can be one of everything. That way they don't have to make a second mobile OS that competes with the first. They don't have to make another desktop OS to compete with the first. They don't have to make all these other OSs just to compete with their originals. They can just have this thing living in the background and promising one day they'll release it, and as long as they never do, they'll be fine. Austin, kids should only be given Raspberry Pis. Okay, look. There is one problem with that. One problem.
The problem is that all cops are bad now includes Raspberry Pi. Sorry, I don't make the rules.
Okay, two problems. But no,
I am half joking.
Yeah, no, you're not. No, the problem is if you give all kids Raspberry Pis. Look, I'm not saying that this will definitely happen. I'm just really sure it will. You will spawn a world of Stewie Griffins, a world of little tiny kids that start reprogramming computers to destroy everything. They will build Skynet. They will build T-1000s. They will build whatever you can conceive of, and it'll be because they're all using Raspberry Pis that can't do anything particularly useful. Or, well, sorry, they can do tons of useful things, but they don't do enough exciting things. And because the kids will need to find a way to turn these things exciting, you better believe it, they will create something that ends the freaking planet. That's why you shouldn't give them Raspberry Pis.
The other,
honestly, just give them something that can play a first-person shooter really, really well, and you will prevent them from becoming the thing that destroys the planet.
I was going to suggest Raspberry Pi is really close to giving them a Linux server to mess with, and at that point you're like guaranteed for your kid to become a furry. It's like almost 100% hit rate on that.
Okay, so now it sounds like you're saying furries are bad, Corbin.
No,
Corbin.
No,
I think you just went on record saying furries are bad.
I would never.
We've just canceled Corbin. At least among the percentage of furries out there, which I don't think is a particularly high voting population, but they are pretty effective on Twitter. So
I'm gonna do the classic white person thing where I say, "Sir, I have several furry friends," so it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I had a Raspberry Pi. I had the first Raspberry Pi when I don't know, when did that come out? I think I turned out mostly okay. When did that come out? Because I remember I didn't have a monitor to use with it, but we had a very old, like, portable all-in-one TV that was like 8 inches and it had a VCR in it, and I would just carry that to my room and plug it in because the Raspberry Pi had an analog. I could almost read the words on the screen. It's really surprising I don't have eye damage. Okay, so that was 2012. So that was. I can't do that math in my head. I'm gonna have to do minus that. Okay, so that was. I was a teen already, so that wasn't quite that young. I'm not gonna say what my confirmed age is because I've been trying to wipe that from the internet, but rest assured.
Hey,
so anyway,
people aren't still calling you by that nickname that Ryan had for you. See, and I'm not calling you by it. I'm a pretty nice guy.
Oh yeah.
I think he's the one who came up with that, right?
I'm Corbin of an indeterminate age, and it will remain that way as long as it's very easy to dox people
yes.
on the internet.
Hey, for what it's worth, almost every site that asks for a birth date, I give them something that is just slightly off from my real birth date.
Oh,
Either
I tell Steam I was born in like 1882. Like whenever that comes up, I'm like, yeah, I'm scrolling to the bottom of the list until I get bored.
okay, on that point, can we talk about how dumb Steam is? Like, why can't they remember your birth date? You're signed in.
That has to be some I have to imagine that has to be some weird legal thing.
It isn't. It can't be.
I don't know.
I refuse to believe that's a legal thing. I think that they're just incompetent.
Mm-hmm. It could be. I mean, they still haven't figured out what an ARM chip is.
Yeah.
Steam on Mac has not been updated. It gets updates all the time. It's still an Intel app. Along with also none of their games work on Mac anymore, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, true.
I think maybe Counter-Strike might have been updated at some point, but the rest of their games are 32-bit, so they do not work. Which is very funny. When I said earlier, I had a Mac Mini that I played a lot of Team Fortress 2 on, and guess what game I can't play on any of my modern Macs? It's very cool.
Yeah. One of these days, I just out of curiosity, I kind of want to go through and install a bunch of games off of Steam just to see how many of them actually play and how many don't. Just to see.
Yeah. I mean, my main game that works on Mac is still Planet Coaster, and I wrote about it in the I'll put it in the comments if anyone cares, but I wrote a blog post where I was talking about some Mac stuff, and I talked about how Planet Coaster ran better under emulation on my Mac than on my gaming PC native.
Yeah.
Even though it's a simulation game, which is like the most CPU taxing kind of game. Nope, still ran better.
Strictly speaking, that might actually make a lot of sense.
It makes sense because the CPU in my gaming PC is pretty old.
Yeah.
Well, not pretty old, but it's first gen Ryzen, which I think was it's a mid range.
Yeah, it's not exactly Ryzen. A high performance CPU, and then you throw it onto Apple Silicon CPUs, where honestly their performance, it's not crazy. It's not like blowing everything out of the water, which is what the benchmarks would tell you it is, but it's still a pretty high performance CPU, all things considered. And it's as a GPU where the M1 was pretty moderate.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if Planet Coaster doesn't really rely on the GPU, or doesn't at all, then it really
I do have to. Yeah, I do have to lower the graphics settings, but they're still pretty close to what they are on my PC. But yeah, the first gen Ryzen was 2017, so that was a while ago. But yeah, still wild. I would really like 2 more games to come to Mac. I want the 2 other video games I play on a regular basis that are new to show up on Mac, and then I don't need a gaming PC anymore. I can run the rest in parallels. The rest of the games I play are all like 10 years old. It doesn't matter. But
yeah. I don't really have any specific list of things that I want to come to Mac outside of I would like to see Tiny Tina's Wonderlands make it, but I think at this point it's a pretty safe bet that's not happening. Which I honestly, you know what? I'm just going to say it. I really think every game company is kind of dumb for not publishing to Mac. At this stage, I say this very sincerely. I think it's actually a dumb business choice not to publish to the platform where people have way more disposable income on average. Like, this is a pretty well established statistic at this stage. And the platform doesn't have a lot of competition on it, which means that if you release something, you're going to have a pretty big market to sell to.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like every time I look at like a list of like here are the best Mac games, and it's like Rise of the Tomb Raider. It's like all right,
Yeah.
literally anything new. Come on, like you're gonna, they're gonna be so. It's exactly like Mastodon before like 6 months ago, where like if you show up, everyone's like, hell yeah, I'll follow you. I don't know what you do.
Yep.
I don't understand this language you're speaking. You're getting a follow. I'm just glad you're here.
Yeah. Like,
And also to your point, like it was the, you know, it is about the, you know, the income's obviously good. I think also with Mac before it was just small market share, and also the hardware was never good. Now the hardware is good on most of them, and Mac market share is increasing again. So
yeah.
I've seen a few games on Steam that are coming out that are targeting Apple Silicon Macs, but yeah, it's still not a lot of them.
Yeah, and every once in a while, like, a new game will pop up in, like, the Apple App Store. It's rare. No question to it. It is definitely rare. But it has happened. And it leaves me with that feeling that maybe someday somebody out there is going to release a game, and it'll suddenly be that, oh wow moment where, holy crap, it actually is doing really well. And then other people will look at that and go, oh crap, we've been putting it off all this time. It's obviously we now have to take it seriously. I feel like that day is going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet, which makes me also wonder, am I one of those like Year of the Linux people that's just very optimistic for a thing that's never going to happen? I don't think I am in this case. I feel like I'm on pretty solid ground for believing it will. Just it has.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's interesting because a big push for Macs getting games was number one, them switching to Intel, and number two, Valve giving a shit.
Yeah.
And now they're not on Intel, and Valve doesn't care anymore. And Valve's new interest is getting Windows games on Linux hardware. That's their thing now. Because that Proton doesn't work on Mac OS because it needs Vulkan, which Apple doesn't want to support. So, you know, fun times. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd really like it to, because again, like you have something that's comparable to a low-end mid-range gaming laptop that doesn't have any fans. It doesn't need active cooling. I don't know why more companies don't want to try to get games on those. It seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
Also, why Apple won't just give a paycheck to some of these companies.
Also,
I know they don't need to. I'd like them to.
Also, speaking of one of the funniest things that game developers always complain about, platform, like, supporting different hardware configurations. I mean, if you don't want to support too many hardware configurations, like Apple's the company you want to build for. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job. You're targeting one operating system version, like 3 chips.
Well done. It's really not hard to target Apple's platforms, whereas it is a weirdly difficult thing to plan out the various combinations of PC CPUs, GPUs, and everything else.
Yeah, I like it to happen. I want Deep Rock Galactic on Mac. I want Fallout 76 on Mac. Almost everything else I can either is either on Mac or can work in parallels. I need that. It's not gonna happen though. But
look, I just want to know where's my Tetris.
Yeah. When are Macs gonna get real games like Tetris?
Can I get Mario Brothers? The original Mario Brothers, like.
Yeah. This is why Mac has so little market share. They don't have Pong.
Yeah.
Where's the Pong?
Meanwhile, sort of very minimally amusingly, I just this week didn't really use, but looked into console emulators. And
Mm-hmm.
holy crap, you can emulate practically everything on a Mac. Like that's not even hard. Almost everybody has a really good emulator, or almost every console has a really good emulator you can run on a Mac. And it's like, huh, maybe this is the secret to gaming on a Mac this whole time.
Yeah. I saw I remember reading some of the initial blog posts from the Dolphin emulator people when they were working on M1 support, and they're like, "Oh, this kicks ass! This is the coolest thing ever."
Yeah. Which it was funny. I stumbled across a couple of similar threads, or not similar, but I ran across a couple of threads for, I think it was the PlayStation 3 emulator. I could be wrong. It was something. Anyway, they based it, like someone suggested it way before Apple ever released the M1, and the people were like, "Yeah, we're not going to support ARM. That's dumb." And then you could read through this thread, and over the years, it's progressively people popping in to say, "Okay, but now is it not dumb as this thing has happened? And hey, look at this. There's now Windows running on ARM. And hey, there are now really good, powerful Android phones with ARM. Why are you not supporting this yet?" And then Apple Silicon comes out, and it's like, there was one or two people who were basically like, "Oh, come on, you guys gotta see how this is just blowing away everything else. Please just fix your stuff to work on ARM." At which point, they fixed like the one thing that they needed to fix, not to make it properly native, but I think it just runs in the like one of the emulation layers, and it's like, okay, it's good enough. It supposedly plays games really well, so no complaints. It may not be as good as it could be, but it's a PS3 emulator. You don't need it to be as good as it can be.
Yeah. I still haven't. I don't know. There's not a whole lot of games I want to emulate on my computer that I can think of, but yeah, mostly just like older PC games I want like parallels for, and maybe DOSBox. I don't know if DOSBox is on M1, but obviously it runs in the Rosetta thing just fine. But yeah. So yeah, I'm very hungry, so I think I'm gonna go now.
And as it turns out, I don't have any other topics. So I think this is actually a good ending time. I frankly thought you were actually going to check out earlier. So
You got me upset, Cody. That's what you get every time.
Well,
got me talking about Chrome OS again.
Yeah, you know how much I can't wait for opportunities to talk about Chrome OS more.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, hey, we're going to be talking about Internet Explorer this weekend, so you know, nothing but the things that should be dead. Anyway, which also you gave me a preview of what's to come this weekend. That's a new one.
Yes.
You accidentally revealed some of this weekend's topics.
Well, you know, stuff that it's like talking about a plot of a movie from like 20 years ago. It's like, it's, you know, how we get there is interesting. But yeah.
Hey, half of this stuff more than half. Almost all this stuff I only remember once I'm reminded of it. It's funny how much you start to block out things with Internet Explorer. Or actually a lot of history, but you get it.
Yeah, I'm working on the one after the next one, and it did devolve into fixing some Wikipedia pages. So that one's taking a little longer.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to a good Wikipedia article when all the well, not all of them, but a lot of the reference links are dead, and when you drag over them, it's like, oh yes, this was last accessed in 2009.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Let me see if I can find this again.
Yeah. Well, such is the internet. But anyway, with that, let's see. For anyone who's curious, I should be back this weekend for the typical gaming stream schedule. Typical or close enough to it. In fairness, I'll be recording with Corbin hopefully Saturday, and as long as something doesn't get in the way. So there's a chance I'll be late. But let's be honest, there's always a fairly good chance I'll be late. It just happens. And Corbin, is there anything you'd like to pitch before you go?
TechTalesShow.com.
Okay.
Go there, listen to Tech Tales. It has Cody sometimes.
Often.
Quite often, in fact. So
we still gotta do a movie.
Yes, I'll eventually do another. The movies turned out to be more work than I anticipated. I thought the movies were gonna be the easy things, but I have to watch a movie and pay attention and keep pausing it, so it keeps.
No, actually, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, yeah, and then I try to do it. The last one I did, I tried to do it the day before the recording because I knew I wouldn't have time the day of. And so then it was like, 7:00 going into like midnight. I'm like, fuck this movie's not done yet.
How did it take you that long?
Well, it wasn't like 7 to midnight. It was, I'm pretty sure I started it much later, but it was still like, oh, this took way longer than I thought because I keep pausing the movie.
Were you
I hadn't seen that movie
pausing to
before.
search stuff or write notes or?
Yeah, checking stuff and writing. Also, that movie was confusing because of the movie hackers, because they kept everyone had two names. They had their normal name and their hacker name. I kept getting lost. I knew what was happening on the screen, but I would have to explain it in audio form. So therein lies the problem.
Okay, I guess yes, I get that. I was gonna say, yes. Dude, you like Westworld? You can follow Westworld, but you couldn't follow hackers?
It was mostly trying to explain it to other people. I think if you point blank tried to ask me to explain Westworld season 1, I would also have a difficult time. Or really anything.
I would only have a difficult time explaining Westworld season 1 without the spoiler that comes at the last episode. But I was thinking more season 2. Let's be honest. Explaining Westworld season 2 to someone who has seen season 2 is hard.
Yeah. There will be more movie episodes. I know there's like several movies. I'm like, that'll be an episode. Yes.
All right. But anyway, with that, that is going to be the end of the show for this week. Thank you for coming by, hanging out, watching the stream, checking out what's going on, and chatting with us, keeping us conversational in whatever capacity we did not already do that to each other. Thank you all if you are contributing to the channel in any way, and if you're not, there are links down below to Streamlabs, Cash App, Patreon, and there's also a referral link to Public. Click on them, do the things if you feel so inclined. If you don't feel so inclined, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't expect much more. So, yeah, I think those are all the words that I can muster. So with that, again, one last time, thank you all, and good night, everybody.